My name is Ryan Paul. I teach history here at SUU, and I am the director of Eccles A.P.E.X. On behalf of myself and the Eccles A.P.E.X team, Case McGrath, Lauren Bird, and Kate Scherer, I want to welcome you to the first event of our Spring 2025 season, From Humble Beginnings to the Top of the World. I would like to thank the Eccles Foundation for their generous and continuous support of this series, John and Ann Smith, and the Provost's office for making this event possible. I'd like to remind you that today's conversation will continue this afternoon at 3 p.m. on Thunder 91.1 and on the A.P.E.X Radio Hour podcast. Sibusiso Vilane's climbing and adventure career began in Swaziland when he met John Doble, a British High Commissioner who was serving then when they met. John Doble then introduced Sibusiso to mountain climbing, which ultimately led him to become the first Black African to successfully summit Mount Everest in 2003. In 2005, he summited Mount Everest again from the north side, thus conquering the mighty mountain from both the south and the north sides, succeeding on the first attempt each time. Sibusiso then embarked on the Seven Summits quest between 2005 and 2008. He successfully completed the project, which is the 7 highest peaks of the 7 continents of the world. He holds the distinction of being the first Black person in the world to achieve this historic feat. In January 2008, he and his South Pole expedition partner became the first South Africans to walk to the South Pole, across the snow and ice, unassisted and unsupported. Another remarkable achievement that won them the inaugural Solomon's Adventure of the Year in 2008. He leads the annual Trek for Mandela and Caring for Girls charity climbs each July as part of Mandela Month. They summit Mount Kilimanjaro on July 18th, which is Nelson Mandela's birthday. He's led several climbing expeditions to Aconcagua in South America, one of the 7 summits. On one of those trips, he led the youngest South African, who was then 15, to the summit. His other accolade is completing the Grand Slam of Adventure, which is conquering the South Pole, North Pole, and Mount Everest. He is only one of 73 people in the world to do this. On a note, I walked from the auditorium to Bristlecone Hall this morning. So, there you go. He has run 9 Comrades marathons, which just for record is 88 kilometers or 55 miles. And in early 2018 went on an attempt to reach the summit of Mount Everest without the use of supplementary oxygen, where he got as high as 8,000 meters without that support. He is the author of To the Top from Nowhere, and we do have some copies of his book for sale in the lobby, and he will be happy to sign them for you after his presentation. It is now my pleasure to welcome Sibusiso Vilane to Southern Utah University and to the Eccles A.P.E.X stage.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. There are many times when I hear the list of things being mentioned, I kind of pinch myself and say, are you for real? Are you really the person who's done all of this? But it is a very delightful moment for me to be here this morning, and I would first like to express a moment of gratitude, being grateful to the university for allowing me the opportunity to come and share my story today, but more gratitude to these wonderful people here, Ryan, Anne, and John, for actually mentioning or bringing up my name to university, which ultimately brought me here. I must say that it was more than climbing Everest to be here, so that's why I'm very delighted and very grateful. It's possibly the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I think it's going to go to my history when people ask me the question, which they tend to do, what was the hardest thing that you've ever done? I'll say, it was just trying to get to the States. And I don't want to waste a lot of time on that, but I'll share it very briefly because it was hilarious. I tried for about 10 days to log on to the website where I needed to apply, and after 2 minutes it kicked me out, and I'll spend hours on end trying, and the one Saturday, in fact I was about to write to this and say, people, I will not be able to make it because I can't get through this process. So I thought, well, just get your young boy that has got those magic fingers. You know these people I'm talking about, you know. If you're struggling with anything of your technology, just one finger, like, what did you do? They're gone. They don't even tell you what they did. The whole thing is fixed. So I thought I will bring my son. I'll ask my son, how are you doing on this Saturday? I would like you to help me through this visa application. And he said, okay, Dad, I will give you my time, a very brief time on Saturday. And I said, it's okay, it should be quite short because it is given on the thing that it takes about 90 minutes. An hour and a half should be enough. We sat for 4 hours. And exactly the same thing happened. As we go through it, he gets kicked out. And I thought, well, now I'm happy. It can't be just me being technically handicapped about this. If the millennials is failing, so I'm fine anyway with that. But we go through here. So that means how delightful and grateful I am to be here. But I am going to share my story, which obviously says from humble beginnings to the top of the world. And it's a story that starts at the age of 4. I say the age of 4 because there was the moment where my parents separated, which forced my mother then to take me and my sister to the small kingdom of Eswatini, coming from South Africa, because my dad is South African. So I spent the first 10 years of my life in very rural South Africa, Swaziland being looked after by my grandmother. But when we arrived in Eswatini, then my mother realized she needed to go to the city to find a job, leaving us with grandma, who was really illiterate. She was not qualified for any job, so she was just like staying at home. She wasn't working, but she was able to fend for herself. Now she has got 2 children that she needs to look after. It becomes very tough for her, as much as it became very tough for us, my sister and I. So here we are growing up as children, and we're walking around from the age of 4 and 5 until 6. We're looking around. We are walking around with no clothes to wear. We have no shoes. Well, shoes are a luxury. We had no shoes to wear. We're running out barefoot, which is very common in Africa. It's not like it's something that makes you unique. We Africans grow up like that. Small kids don't wear shoes at a certain point, but there's some times where you feel like, why don't I have shoes just like anyone? Because they're not wearing them because they don't want to wear them, but you didn't have a pair of shoes. It was because it was not something that was within your grandmother's mindset. We want to buy you shoes. But the most critically challenging side was we never had clothes to wear because my dad didn't really bother to come and help us. Only my mother, after months of having gone to Siton Babane, came back with some clothes, and then we were able to have clothes to wear. So if people had seen me and my sister at that age, most people would have obviously felt pity because we looked, well, here, that is when I was with my mother, so that doesn't replicate my first 10 years of my life. I was much more thinner and skinnier than that, but it's fine. That was that. But if people had seen me and my sister, they would have thought, oh, poor children. Yes, we looked poor because we had no food to eat, we had no clothes to wear. But were we poor? I don't think so. I think we were wealthy because we were alive. Everyone who's given life to live is rich and wealthy, so we were. Anyway, at the age of 6, people came to my grandmother and asked if I could help them looking after goats. And my grandmother obviously was sort of compelled to say yes because the promise was that we were going to be paid. And I would still want to believe that that was my first time I had to work. I had a job. I was age 6, and I look after goats, and I was sharing with kids yesterday. I said, you guys don't know how difficult it is to look after goats. They are wild. They run all over the place, and you are chasing them, and you are alone in the field. You're spending time, you're not eating, but you needed to bring them home in the evening, all of them. And I did that job brilliantly well. Actually, I'm very proud of myself for that. But as a result of it, I got a little bit of an upgrade. You know, when people see that you're doing well in your job, you do get a promotion. My promotion was to be given a better responsibility to look after cattle. Head of cattle. I thought goats were the worst, but cattle were even much worse. That meant you drive them into the field and spend time with them from the morning until the late afternoon. Then you start bringing back to the house where they belong for night crawling, and you leave them like that. I did that for about 3 to 4 years. I'm not at school, and the biggest question at the little boy's mind is, why am I at school? And we realize that it's because your grandmother cannot afford it. The only thing that she can afford is to bring food on the table. And then you appreciate the efforts she's making to do that. My mother comes back when I was about 9 years old. She takes me and my sister with her to Mbaban, and then I get away from being a head boy looking after livestock. She has met a wonderful man who became my stepdad, and my stepdad looked at my sister and myself and said, I love these children. I would like to give them an opportunity to go to school. Just to say a little bit about his kindness and generosity of helping us, his own son had just dropped out of school. So can you imagine the devastation he might have had? If he was like any other person, he would have said, oh, my own child has just dropped out of school, so why do I bother? But he didn't think about that. He said, I'm going to give them an opportunity to go to school. At the age of 10, I start grade 1. It was a question that came yesterday. Up until that age, had you learned other things like writing or reading? None of that. I'd never done that. So it was at age 10 when I sit in a classroom that I was able to learn how to sketch things called writing and then reading as well. But I want to believe that I was a very bright, smart child, because in my schooling times, I don't know if it happened many years here in the States, in my schooling days or in Africa, it was very common that during the end of term exams, you get a little envelope that they call report card. And then when your class teacher wanted to give you a report card, they said, class, come up to the stage. And we all walked up to the stage. Well, obviously, looking very anxiously and worried whether you've made it or not. And then they will call one by one. They will start by the first one who topped the class. And I dominated in that for the next 5 years of my primary school, because I'll always be the first one that gets called to walk off the stage with your envelope, and then you go sit down. That showed how bright and how smart I was. But what has helped me, being this clever little boy, was the time I spent with goats and cattle and the bushes. So it has helped me that way. Anyway, I take this opportunity by my stepdad, and I appreciate it by being the best I can be. For me, that is the one lesson I've learned, which I share with people. If an opportunity lands on your lap, in your hands, in the palm of your hands, the one thing you can do yourself, it is not to do it for the person who has given you the opportunity, but you take it and make it count for yourself. You don't, because most of us, or most of the people, particularly my children, I'll make a story. I was looking at the report card and I said, this is very average. You're not average. You're better than this. Then the next time they do better, and then I hear the story, then, how, you did well, my son. Nomsa says, this is my wife, she says, oh, you did well. And then my son says, well, I just wanted Daddy to be happy. I'm like, no, there's no way you can make me happy because this is yours. But we tend to feel that the opportunity given to us, I want to do it for the person. No, you're not doing it for the person, because they didn't give you the opportunity for them. They give you the opportunity for you to benefit you. Therefore, I appreciated that, worked very hard up to high school. And when I go to higher secondary school, I realized that my stepdad, because in Eswatini, you pay for everything. You buy your children's clothing, uniform, your textbooks and whatever, and then you also pay for the school fees. So the higher you go in the school, the more expensive it gets. So he was getting to a stage where it was becoming near impossible for him to pay for my next high school grade. And therefore I thought, okay, what do you do with that? I went to house in the streets of Mbaban looking for work, and I got a job as a garden boy. I was given this opportunity by a wonderful Canadian couple, Penny and Douglas Watt. They had 2 of the children, Steve and Kelly, and I spent about a year with them. And then one day I said to them, it looks like I will have to leave you and go find another place where I can possibly get a little better pay. And then I want to save a little bit of money to enroll myself to the next grade, because my stepdad is unable to do that. And then they looked at me and said, well, Sibusiso, we will think about this and we'll let you know next week, because I used to work for them on the Fridays and on Saturdays, on the weekends. So I go away on the Saturday. I'm looking forward to what they would say. The next Friday when I came in, and Penny calls me into the room before I started the work. She says, Sibusiso, my husband and I have decided that we are going to help you with the next 5 years of your schooling education. Another opportunity which I appreciate, and I take that again with excitement and with joy, and then I work very hard. But they brought it clear to me to say, well, we can only help you to get to that level of education. After that, we will not be able, because our little children here will be needing a lot of our finances, but we'll be very, very grateful to assist you up until you finish high school. I said, thank you very much, and I worked very hard, knowing that whether I make it or whether I don't make it, I wasn't going to get to college, university. But that didn't really disappoint me. I worked hard. In 1991, 21 years old, I walked out of high school knowing that I needed to find myself a job. I think every person tends to have some idea of, if they get a job, what they were going to do, what you call it, a dream or a goal of yourself. My first sort of ambitious dream or goal was to find a place, because we were growing up in this little in a township house in Mbaban. It was very small and I didn't like it, so I thought it would be up to me to get us a better place where I can build a much more better or bigger house. And I knew that if I get a job, that's what I was going to be doing. So from out of high school, I channeled my energy towards that and wanting to build a house where my mother could go, where my sister and I would live. So I was very desperate to get a job, and I landed a job in a construction company where I was doing ordinary manual labor, which was hard. It was difficult, but I spent 2.5 years grafting every day. The pay wasn't anywhere near making me to meet my goals, so that gave me more motivation to keep trying and keep trying, because at the back of my mind, I thought there was something better on the other side. I didn't know what that would be, and I would write letters and I would talk to people, but I never left that job, hard as it was, for 2.5 years. But one day, when I went to my mailbox, I opened up, I found a letter or an envelope that sort of, the response was sorry, as most of them were. We're sorry you don't have any jobs. However, we have kept your application just in case something come out. And I thought, my goodness, that was very close to me getting a job. Anyway, I continue working, and then a month later, I go again, open my little mailbox, a bunch of letters in there. I look at this envelope, it looks familiar. And I said, I thought they'd replied to me saying there's no job. What are they possibly saying? Maybe when they said they've kept my letter, maybe this is an opportunity. So I opened up, and yes, it says, can you please arrange for a date for an appointment for the interview with us? And it was in a nature reserve north of Mbabane called Malolocha Nature Reserve. And then I went to the foreman and I said to him, I would like to have a leave tomorrow because I've been given a date for an interview. Then I asked him, sort of a puzzle, I said to him, what do people do in game reserves? And he said, well, I don't really know, and I think they look after the animals. I said, well, that's fine anyway. I'm just going to let me go and do this interview. So I walk into the interview room. I get given a piece of paper. I answer these questions, and I know these answers to the questions because as a little boy growing up in the bush, I became very familiar with animals' names and the trees and the plants, because this was all conservation-related questions. So it has put me in good stead that I was growing up as a little boy, having cows and goats, hating it as it was, that it would benefit me one day sitting in an interview room. And the senior warden who was interviewing me at the end, after marking my script and talking to me, he says, well done, Mr. Vilane, you've got yourself a job as a game ranger. And I thank him, but at the back of my mind, there's lots of questions going, I just wonder what rangers do. I had no idea. But then anyway, I thought, well, you know what it is like to work in a construction company as a manual laborer. Just take this risk, take this chance and go and see what happens. One of the other lessons, life is about taking risks. You will never know what will happen, but you cannot stop taking risks. But calculated risk, that's what people call it. So I went to serve my notice at the construction company, and then after that I went to start at Malolocha Nature Reserve as a game ranger and tourist officer. I'll go very quickly around my responsibilities responsibilities there. You would work at reception area, signing people in, showing them where they could drive and walk, because it was one of those which was in a big game park. The people could just walk as they please. And then some of the other weeks you would join the field rangers, anti-poaching patrols, manning the fences and clearing the trail. So that is what we would do. So I started in Malolocha in 1991 and up until 1993. 1993 to 1996, I'm enjoying this job, and I found myself a piece of place where I eventually built the house for my sister and myself, which later became my children's home, just outside the nature reserve where I worked. So I achieved that goal. But I'm really enjoying nature. I'm enjoying working in this place. And then on a Saturday afternoon, so now this now gets me to the adventure side of my life. I had never hiked. I'd never slept in a tent. I wasn't interested because I thought the hiking, the walking that we're doing in the park was enough. So when we did these camps in the anti-poaching with little huts where we stayed, then that was good enough. So if a person walks in to the reception area where I'd been serving in the morning and he's signing out, I'm standing on the side. I happened to hear this conversation between him and my work colleague, which went like, "My friend, you work in such a beautiful place. And I did a walk this morning, and I found it really, really beautiful. But there was a point where I got really concerned because it is rough and rugged, and I didn't feel comfortable walking alone. And all I want to know, my friend, is are there any people or groups of hikers or climbers, or hikers that come and walk here on a weekend because I would like to walk here?" My work colleague very correctly said, "I'm sorry, sir. People that come and walk here, when they do, they walk with their own groups of friends." I hear this and my heart starts pounding. I still wait for the next comment, and this man says the next comment, "Do you know a local fellow or a guy from the community here whom I can ask?" Then I step up to him and I said, "Yes, I hear you would like to walk here. I'll be that fellow from the community that would like to take you on a walk in the game reserve, provided you come on a weekend when I'm off duty." He says, "Oh, that's very kind of you." He tells me his name, John Doble. You heard his name mentioned, the then High Commissioner in Eswatini. I'm only 3 days in this country, having arrived. I don't know anyone, so it is very kind of you to offer me your time. When are you going to be off on a weekend? Then we can do this walk. So I tell him when it was going to be. So I knew then when, on the day that we put, that I would be taking someone very special, very important, particularly as an ambassador. I needed to really look after him because I realized that if anyway the British High Commissioner got injured in my guidance or leadership, I wasn't going to be very popular with His Majesty. So it was a very big responsibility on the day. But we had a very good day, and I'm here. I'm helping him, scrambling on really rocks, John, and I'm telling him, hold very carefully here. We go, but eventually, after 5, 6, 7 hours, we found ourselves at the top of a peak, which is called Bulembu on the Barberton mountain range. It's such a beautiful view, but what it gave me at the time was it gave me a sense of accomplishment because we had really worked very hard to get to the top of the peak, I think. But did that inspire me to want to climb more mountains? Not on that day, because we were all utterly exhausted. But anyway, we left that and then we descended down to the river, crisscrossing it many times until we got to this beautiful waterfall. We come from the bottom of it, we get to here. John looks up because it is spectacular looking at it. It's also quite high. He looks at it, he says to me, "Do you think that anyone can possibly climb to the top part of the waterfall to have a view of it from above?" And I look up at it and say to him, "Yes, it can be done. It can be done if we would climb on the side, provided we don't swim, because I cannot swim. So we can't swim to it." He says, "Jolly good, it's okay with me, you lead the way." So I help him on the side, we scramble along, we climb up, we get to the top part of the waterfall, and he has the view that he wanted to see. But at the same time, he has a different view than that. It is a view focused towards me, where he saw that I didn't show any fear. I was very agile, and with safety, I was able to guide him to the top. And he believes that it is an amazing ability. And he says it to me, he says, "Sibusiso, it has been phenomenal watching you today. You climb with such ease and such agility. I think you would have made a good climber." So I tried to talk him off this idea that I would have made a good climber. I say, "Well, Actually, I don't really know why people climb mountains and climb rocks. It doesn't sit well with me. Seeing a person hanging over a cliff, I always just think about them just losing their footing and falling on the ground, breaking bones and things. I don't know why they do it. John goes on and he says to me, well, it is an amazing sport, and you pay attention and you pay a lot of focus and you plan, you don't haphazardly do it. So he says at that moment, which then obviously turns the course of my life forever, that moment John says, well, having thought about it very deeply today, I don't remember an African having attempted Everest since Hillary climbed it in 1953. This was in 1996. So I thought, well, Everest should be a mountain that is not in Africa. It must be overseas somewhere. And I knew that Africa is Kilimanjaro is our mountain. So I say to John, are we talking about a mountain which is overseas? He says, yes, it is in the Himalayas, in this small country, it's in a country called Nepal or Tibet. But it is the highest in the world in the Himalayas, vast range of mountains called the Himalayas. And I'd never heard about the Himalayas. So he says it's covered on snow, and he tries to describe this mountain to me, and doesn't make sense. But anyway, I thought I would make a comment. So I say, well, you realize that there is no African who can afford to buy a ticket to travel overseas to climb a mountain. Because again, I play this tape, I'm thinking about either my mother or my grandmother who's really struggling or striving to bring food on the table. I go to him and I have this little very social conversation. I say, either mommy or grandma, can I please have some money to buy a ticket to go overseas? And then they listen with attention, thinking, oh, thank goodness, finally, maybe he's got a scholarship or something, or a job for that matter. And then why do you want to go? Because they will ask you the question, as a matter of interest, why do you want money to go buy a ticket to go overseas? Oh, no, I'm going to climb a mountain. No, that talk will not last long. It will be very brief, because they will say all sorts of things, but the biggest they will say is, what have you eaten or what have you smoked? Anyway, but I thought it was that, and I thought, now that you've just said this, then it's enough. He's not going to add a comment, but John wasn't going to be listening. He says to me, Sibusiso, people that do some of those things, particularly those big mountains and adventure expeditions, they get sponsorship. So he says to me, what you've just said to me that is about not being able to afford it, do you want to say that if you had the resources to climb Everest, would you do it? Here's a boy who's grown up in the bushveld, in the lowveld, the very rural South Africa, in Swatini, had never seen a big mountain like Everest, had never seen snow, doesn't relate to high altitude or anything. You ask him this question, I think it would have been very easy for me to say, oh, no, not for me, I'm not interested. But at that moment, I remembered what the comment that he had started with, where he said, an African has not done it. But at the back of my mind, there was this feeling that Africans could do it. So when he poses this question, I say to him immediately, I say, absolutely, I'll be delighted. I'll be delighted to climb Everest. And when I said that, I had no clue how high Mount Everest was. I didn't know what I was talking about, but it was that. But I say this to him, and I realized the reason I said it wasn't because I was excited about climbing Everest. There was something within me that prompted me to say that. It was that little self-belief that I could do it. And I say that. So anyway, John decides, okay, if you don't mind, Sibusiso, I'm going to try and find out how people get involved. I said, well, it's your call, you can do it. Him and I became friends from 1996, then up until the end of 1999. We hiked together multiple times in Malolocha and the Drakensberg. And then in 1999, he sponsored me to go climb Kilimanjaro with his friends. So I got back to him after that trip, and I said to him, I had such a fantastic climb, and I was thinking about that little project you mentioned to me of climbing the highest mountain in the world, Everest. John says to me, Sibusiso, I've been trying to find out and no one is responding to me. So at the same time, I thought it was a wild idea. It might not just happen. I said, oh, it's okay. We can live it. Anyway, he goes back, he leaves Southern Africa, end of 1999, he comes to England, which is obviously a climbing culture. Within 2 months, he found a company that was putting together an expedition or a team of climbers to climb Everest during his 50th anniversary. July 2002, I received a letter from John. We were not emailing or telephoning each other, we write letters to each other. I miss him dearly because John has passed away 2 years ago. I received a letter from him saying, Sibusiso, I found a company in Sheffield. They lead expeditions to all corners of the world, but the most important is that they are putting a team together to climb Everest next year. I'm writing to you to let me know because you once said to me, if you had a chance to do it, you would do it. I'm writing to you to let me know if you still think you will want to do it. He says, it is your decision. I'm not trying to influence you to say yes. It's your call. It was the one other thing that I learned from that moment there. Motivation cannot be outside influenced. It has to be inside. That will, that desire to do something has to come from within. So that is what John was trying to say from me, that if your heart does not agree or align with what I'm saying to you, you don't have to say you want to do it. But I wanted to do it because I remembered the reason why I would want to do it, which goes back to what I am going to say. It's critically important for all of us, and it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're going academics or career or adventure, it's important to ask you the question, but why? Why do you want to do it? So when John poses this question to me to say, do you want to do it? I ask myself immediately, why did you say you want to do it in the first place? Then I remember that the reason I said to him I want to do it is because I just wanted to prove to myself that it can be done. I wanted to prove to Africans that they can do it, and much more, I wanted the world to know that Africans can as well. So that was very important to me. So I write to him, I say, John, yes, absolutely, I still want to do it because, you know, I don't want to do it this for me. I just want to do this. I didn't even say for my country. I said I wanted to do it for my continent. I think the Sunday Times, when I summited, I still have this framed picture where it says, I did it for Africa. That was my motivation to do it. So I said, yes, I would like to do it. John goes to these people, and then he says, okay, they say to me, we can't be in the team, but with your inexperience, they would want you to climb in the Himalayas pre-expedition. And I said to John, it's all right, if that pre-expedition will give me a ticket to be in the team, I would like to do it. And then October 2002, I took my leave days, it was 26 days, and disappeared, didn't tell anyone where I was going. I said I'm visiting a friend in England. And then I arrived in London. We flew to Kathmandu, climbed 3 mountains, which were not anywhere near Everest summit, Everest altitude, but they were high enough to give me the experience I needed. So I came with that, and I said, John, I think I can do it. You tell those people I can. And anyway, last minute debate and discussions with John, they allowed me into the team. And that was the team that I was with. We were 12 of us in the team, and there was the only African in the team. The rest of them Americans. We had British, with Norwegians, with Canadians. So we were quite diverse. I would learn with that it doesn't matter where you come from. When you find yourself in a situation where you share the summit of one mountain, you just unite, you come together, you adapt to each other regardless of your backgrounds, and they were wonderful people to climb with. So we had a support team of about 40 climbing Sherpas. We meet each other in Kathmandu, we travel together, we fly to this little place called Lukla. You land on this tiny airstrip, which is described as one of the world's top 10 most dangerous landing airstrip. That's fine. I'm still here, so it's not dangerous. Doesn't kill people. I've flown onto it more than 10 times, so it's all right. But on paper, that's what it is. We land here, and then we start trekking into base camp. And I'm learning everything as I go because I don't know nothing. And to my shock, at night, when I go to sleep, I shiver because it is minus 15 degrees, and then it is minus 20 at night in a tent. But anyway, I'm thinking, you come from Africa, which is very hot, and then you come to this place, it is extreme cold. How are you going to survive 2 months? And I realized I needed to be better than that. So this is the little city of Namche where we start. On one of the mornings, we walk up to the very top part of the village. From a distance, you can see Everest, and I feel inspired to continue to go. For the 10 days of walking, we use the Sherpas. We walk through their villages, and they carry everything that we will need. They use their domestic animals called yaks, and they are wonderful people. They carry everything. You as a climber just carry with your little day bag, and eventually we arrive at base camp. This is now end of March 2003. After 10 days, base camp is already set up, and when we get to base camp, we get a briefing, because I thought we will arrive at base camp, spend one night, climb to the next camp and another night, and then go on to the next, and then summit the mountain, and then go home. Within a week, I thought I'd be back at home, but I looked at a little paper, which they called an expedition dossier. There was 60 days on it. I didn't really pay much attention, as there's no way it's going to take me 60 days to climb a small mountain. Well, it's the highest in the world. But a mountain, what you do on 60 days. So when we got here within 10 days, having 50 days, I wondered what's going to happen with the 50 days. I was soon to learn, because we arrived here, we're told we're going to spend about a week of getting acclimatized to it, and then the mountain stands in front of us. Every time you wake up in the morning, you look up, it was there. So we happened to find that when you climb a mountain, as they say in other parts of the world, if you had a chance to eat an elephant, which I always question, they say it's one bite size at a time. I say, why would you dare want to eat an elephant anyway? But that's what they say. So the mountain teaches you that if you are climbing these vast or big mountains, the only way you can be able to climb it is breaking it into smaller stages. And for us, the mountain from above base camp is divided into 4 camps. The challenge with the 4 camps is that you don't climb from camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, camp 4 in one go. You've got to sleep on one of them and then descend back, which was very frustrating. They call it rotations or acclimatization. By the time I got to base camp, I thought we'd acclimatized, but it wasn't. And what makes it even much more difficult is you spending a lot of time having to contend with a whole host of obstacles, just like the ones on the board. But for me, the cold was the most difficult to take, or the most hardest. The terrain was okay, but it was also very spooky when, as an African, you start walking on crumbling things like that. That's called the Kumbu Icefall, just above base camp. And they say it's a frozen river of ice, which means that it is naturally shifting in a way, and you will be not knowing that it is moving, but you put your foot on it, and the whole thing crumbles all over the place. And I'd never seen something like that, and I couldn't even describe what it was, but that's what it is. It helped to be in a team of people, because you follow others and you look at what they're doing, and then you just apply, and I will do that. But the most spectacular sight, which made me think about Africa as well, was when I found myself at this little campsite, and I thought, if I was in Africa, surely I would be having this on a very flattish, grassy platform. And here it is on the ice, which means inside it is even worse than a freezer. And at night you will be trying to sleep in that little tent. You will wake up and then it is caked up with icicles. So if you touch the zip of your tent, there will be this avalanche of ices that falls on you. You shiver the entire night. This is where I really realize how important it is to ask that question before you leave home, but why you do it. Because asking your question here will definitely make you pack your bags the next day and decide, bye-bye, I'm going home. But you've got to do that. You've got to be there. Anyway, so we were really doing quite well, my team and I, to succeed, to climb. On our first rotation, we climbed up to Camp 1, which was hard because it took us 8 hours, which is really not much climbing. Surely less than a kilometer or 2 kilometers to get to Camp 1, but it would take us 10 hours of agonizing climbing, crossing hundreds of crevices along that we deal with, but eventually we got over the crevices, some of them. I would show that if you're looking here, there's 2 sets of aluminum ladders, and then obviously you've got a void of that never ends. There's another ladder over there. Then this fellow is clipped on, fixed up on the ropes, and you ask your question, but then who puts up all those safety measures up there? It is the mercy of your support team, those wonderful Sherpas that risk their lives and go ahead to try and make sure that I'm safe on the mountain. I love them very much. They are the ones that helps us climb the mountain. But so we deal with that, and it helps to know that there are people looking after you. The most frightening or scary ones were these ones for me, because that one as well, it's the same thing. You're walking along, but there is just an endless void at your feet. And you've got to look down, obviously, because you're walking, trying to pay attention to one strand after another. And then you realize if you slipped and missed a step and fell in, you unclipped, will definitely be your last fall. And you don't want that. You need to go, you've got to pay every attention when you're moving here. And the challenge is the Kumbo Icefall. You're living death every second of your being at this place. Very dangerous part of the mountain. And I found it very relevant to life and setting a goal. You tend to be challenged on the very first step. You're not even anywhere or halfway up the mountain, but you are dealing with that. Asks you the same question, but why? If you don't know why, you fall away. But anyway, we did very well with our rotations, but the most frustrating for me was the third and final rotation, which had taken us to about Camp 3. This is at 7,300 meters. Apologies, because I was saying the other day, I can never understand how did we Africans find out adopted meters and kilometers when we were following the British syllabus, because I know the British use feet and miles, but we were following their syllabus and we're sitting with kilometers and all of that, and altitude is meters. So pardon me, I have no idea what a feet is or foot is. So this is at 7,300 meters. We arrive here. So now this is me now trying to apply human logic. Bear with me here. Base camp is at 5,300 meters. You've climbed up for more than 3 days trying to get to this altitude at 5,700. The summit camp is 700 meters, which is 8,000 meters. And then you kind of sit there and you think, but it is shorter for me to go to Camp 4, 8,000 meters, and then you climb the last 848 meters to the summit. Then you go down and then you go home. So that sort of proved to be the easiest way to do it for me, quicker, go, but I was told when I asked, when we got here, when I said, why are we not going to the summit? And they said, Sibusiso, there are a number of disciplines that needs to be applied by anyone when they want to succeed and reach the top. And one of them is being able to acclimatize. One of them is being able to walk down to the next camp and to base camp to allow your body. But one of them is recognizing that if you climb from here to the summit, you won't last forever. You might live on the mountain forever because you will not make it, you will die. So when they said you will die, I said, it's okay, let's go down. Let's go down. And then we went down after, it was now towards the end of April, of 3 rotations. It was devastating with all that much work, but we were told that is the only way. So we climbed down to base camp. We sit for about a week or so, where we were waiting for a 7-day weather window to open for us. When you wake up in the morning and hope that you might be climbing, this is the picture you want to see, because it means no breath of wind. This one here, this little plume here, is the snow dust being blown into the atmosphere by the jet stream. So when you see that at breakfast in the morning, you lose your appetite and tell your guy, sorry, I'm going to skip breakfast. It takes 8 days for us to wait at base camp, resting. We call it the waiting game. As a blessing in disguise, on the 8th of May, we get a report that says we could go, and we are excited about it. We pack our bags, climb up to Camp 1, up to Camp 2, we climb up to Camp 2, and it is looking like that, bleak as it is, but it is okay. We fight our way to the little camp. We arrive in the afternoon, and we go to sleep, hoping to wake up the next morning and progress to Camp 3. It starts snowing profusely throughout the night. When we wake up in the morning, the conditions are such that we cannot continue because it is more dangerous. The crevices, the hundreds of them that are lying down, are now well breached. So with assessment by our expedition leaders, they realized that we can't go. So they say to us, sorry guys, we cannot make it. We will go back to the camp, and then we'll make a call to base camp to find out what is the latest weather focus or update. And to our devastation, that update was such that we needed to get out of the mountain as quickly as we possibly can, because an even worse blizzard was approaching. So get out of there, come down to base camp. Disappointed all the way down to base camp, and it didn't sit well with all of us. But the most devastating part was it wasn't going to last for only a day or two. That spell was about 10 days of that bleak weather. But anyway, after that, then we get a glimmer of hope because we were given another one, which we took again with excitement, climb up to Camp 1, go to Camp 2. This time we were able to progress to Camp 3, and we got to Camp 4. Camp 4, 8,000 meters. That's where you launch for your final summit assault, which is only 848 meters left for you to go to the summit. So we were excited to get there, and we arrive at about midday. We rest for the afternoon because we will start at about midnight, and the reason for that is so that we can have enough time to climb during the cooler hours of the evening and the early morning hours. We summit the mountain early, and then we're able to come down to the safety of our camp in daylight. You don't want to lose light on the mountain. It is as logic as like that. So we're very excited to arrive at Camp 4 at midday with enough time to rest. Come the time when we needed to start up, we realized that the wind was picking up, and sensibly our expedition leader says, we are not going to move tonight. We will stay here for the entire night and then see what the conditions are like the next morning. So the next morning, which would have been our summit day, the winds are still raging and it is very windy, it's freezing cold. We stay in our tents up until about late in the afternoon. In the late afternoon, the wind dies down, giving us hope. And then we start climbing that night towards a high camp, Camp 1. We climb to 8,000 meters, 8,100, 8,200. We get to 8,300, it starts picking up the wind, and we're thinking it might stop us, it might not stop us, but we brave it, we keep fighting on. And then we got to within, it was past midnight, we get to within a few hundred meters before the summit. It was still a long way to go when we suddenly heard this loud sound coming from the valleys. It sounded like a private jet taking off, but it wasn't a private jet taking off. These were the jet streams approaching from the valleys, and within minutes, bang on us, big snow dust and snowstorms and windstorms. Literally, you could feel that you were being lifted off your feet. So we're holding dearly on the winds. It was one of those scary nights of my being on a mountain because I thought we were going to die. So we huddled together. Our expedition leader says, let's wait and then see what happens for 10 minutes. Nothing had happened, and then they said, we're sorry, we need to turn around. We're 248 meters before the summit. Feeling dejected and defeated, we withdrew back to Camp 4. Because my team and I had now been in the dead zone for more than 24 hours, we were forced to descend back down to Camp 2 and sit at Camp 2 looking very defeated. Nature had just taken away the summit from us. I was very sad about this because this has been our second attempt on the mountain, and I thought, that's it, Sibusiso, you are going home. So I was really, really disappointed and devastated at the same time, because I knew at the back of my mind that if I walk away without a summit, there was no way I was going to get another chance to go climb Everest again after what we had gone through to be able to make me get there. I really wanted to get to the top. But it was then that I learned that in life, there will be a moment when a human being is never in control. In life, there will be a moment when nature will be in charge. And in life, we need to accept when that happens, that there is nothing we could have done with our human ability and capability to get to the top. So we accepted that. But the good thing, though, as we were sitting here, our expedition leader says to us, guys, sorry about what happened yesterday. This was our second attempt on the mountain, but there's nothing we could have done, and we feel and believe that we made the right choice or decision to come down. But here's the thing. We still have got enough resources, as into oxygen. We have enough resources, as into food. The question is, what do you do? What do you want to do? Do you want to climb, stay here and rest and then climb when the weather clears, or you want to pack your bags and go home? At that moment, I realized that when they were saying to us, you have got oxygen, you have got food, they were saying material resources is still available. The big question is, do you still have the inner resources. Do you still have the determination? Do you still have the drive? Do you still have the will? Do you still hold that goal very dear within you that you are here for? And I'm so glad that all of us understood that question very well, because all of us said, yes, we are going to stay here. And then if the weather clears, we give it another shot. It was on the 24th of May when the weather looked like it was changing and getting clearer. And then we start again. We climb up to the high camp, Camp 3. We get to Camp 4 around about midday. We rest at about 9 p.m. We started. We climbed 8,100, 8,200, 8,300. And this time we got back to where we'd been stuck at 8,600 meters. I can see that it is looking good. We are going to continue. At about the early morning hours, it looks spectacularly beautiful. I feel inspired and encouraged to keep fighting on. But it wasn't one of those that you will say it was a clear, or it was a nice, easy breeze day. It was still windy. It was cold. I think that night temperatures were estimated to be between minus 36 and minus 50. Winds were still raging high, but the beauty of it, of being there, just encouraged me to want to continue. I finally found myself at the same place where I'd been defeated. And then I get to here and I look up, I realize I could go. It was there that I started thinking about that young boy growing up in the bushveld in Eswatini in South Africa, walking barefooted with no food to eat, with no clothes to wear. I think about that young boy who was chasing goats and cows, the one who starts school at the age of 10. It just humbles me, it overwhelms me, and I start becoming emotional, because then it reminds me where I come from, but much more it reminds me of what the message that I was carrying within myself. And that encourages me to deal with this very daunting part of the climb, steep, very thin, and then up to the summit. But at that stage, I just feel that Africa is just lifting me up. I feel very light. I can take the next step, and the next step, as hard as it is, I craft. And it is in the early morning hours of the 26th of May that I believe I was the tallest African on earth. I'd reached the summit of Mount Everest. It had taken me 60 days. It had been 2 months of agony, 2 months of frustration. It was 2 months of facing defeat in our faces. It was 2 months of having to fight through the storms and through the winds, but it was 2 months of trying to keep yourself self-motivated and driven by consistently reminding yourself, why are you there in the first place? I gave the opportunity to stand on top of the world and spend 15 minutes, and they were 15 minutes of my life. I couldn't have had any other better moment. They were ecstatic, exhilarating as you can, but for me, it was such a humbling moment to stand there and look and know that the world knows that Africa can. It was just the views that inspires me, looking at the world at the base of my small feet. But as I was standing there, I was thinking to myself, will you ever climb another mountain again? And I said, no. So we descend. It takes about 3 days to descend back down to base camp, and I'd learned a lot about what it takes to reach the top of mountains. I'm not going to run through that, it's there. But I've taken that because the journey for me was transformational. It has transformed my life to a better person that looked into the world with a different eye, but much more, it just became a confirmation again to me that I am more than capable to achieve, just like anybody. In finishing off, I would like to share a moment I had with the then former President Nelson Mandela, which somehow has led me to doing all this stuff that was mentioned, the 7 summits, the South Poles and the North Poles, and all the other things that I still do today. On the 17th of June, 2003, I happened to meet Nelson Mandela, which I never knew how I was going to meet him, because at the lodge where I worked in the game reserve in Mpumalanga, I was told that before my time there, he had stayed in one of the lodges because it was a big safari operator. he had stayed there, and it wasn't before my time. So at the back of my mind, every time I was driving guests, they would say, Nelson Mandela stayed here. Did you get to meet him? And I would always say, oh, unfortunately, I wasn't here at the time. I never got to meet him, but I would like to meet him one day. So when I got this invitation to meet him, I was very ecstatic. And I go in there, I meet him, but then he had to address the media because there were people standing there with big cameras, and he says this to me. He says, Sibusiso, what you have done inspires all of us. He says, your achievement shows the world that Africa is here and Africa is capable. And he says, it stops the world, the Western world, to think that they're the only ones who can challenge the near impossible and triumph. Your story inspires us, but much more. You have set a standard for Africa. He says, it is a standard I wish young people can rise up to and try and follow in your footsteps and achieve what you have achieved. And his words echo in my ears every day, even right now. And with those words, I said, I'm not going to stop. I will continue to inspire a generation of people who never limit themselves, a generation of people who never believe that their backgrounds should dictate or determine what they do with their lives, because it is not about where you come from. It is not about where you grow up. It is not about your social standing, but it is about how far and how high you want to go. And you can go as far and as high as you believe you can do. Thank you very much indeed for listening so patiently. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.